Yes, hello, entrepreneurs. Thanks for watching today. Sorry for the slight delay there. Um, Welcome to this Entrepreneurs Live called How to Design Convincing Conversational Experiences. We have Sasha Walter on the show. Hi, Sasha. How are you?
Hi, fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, good. Never
How
a
is it
dull
in
moment.
How is it
it's,
in Amsterdam?
it's cold, but the same, probably colder for Germany, I guess.
Yes, maybe.
Well, it's good to see you again. We did an interview a couple of years ago, so it's interesting to speak with you again. I just put
But
the
you haven't
message.
changed. You look the same like last time.
Only grayer, probably, but cannot stop the time. Yeah. So for people who don't know you, you you used to work at Amazon with the Alexa team, right? And then you spent quite some years with Cognigy AI in Düsseldorf,
Yes,
and you're now working with the German railway Deutsche Bahn.
yes, that's right.
Cool. And maybe you want to introduce yourself a little further.
Oh well, those are the companies I work for. Before that, I used to work as a contractor or freelancer. But honestly, that's not really something which is important to me because I'm more or less project oriented. So that means I like to work in great projects with great teams, and if there's something which drives me, which is of interest, then I don't care if I have to write invoices or I get a salary. It's not really a matter. And I'm from my interests, I'm somehow in between technology. So I feel like a developer from my inside, but I'm very much addicted to user experience, the overall experience, customer experience. So I like to give an answer to the why question. Why do I those fancy things? Why do I write code? Why do I build, for instance, voice apps or chatbots? So what's the reason for that? And most interesting is the aspect of the experience. So does it really make sense what you're doing? Is there a benefit? Is this somehow better than what you did before?
Yeah,
So I try to bring technology and user experience together. And yes, you have to spice it a little bit with business development and things like that.
cool. Yeah, don't just make bots because we can, but it has to make sense also.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, some small thing I forgot. It's always nice to ask the viewers where they are watching from. So I don't mean YouTube, LinkedIn, or or Facebook, but which country and city to get those comments warmed up. And Sasha and I hope you will be quite active posting questions. Then we can keep it dynamic and answer them right away. And as a backup, I also prepared some questions, and I know Sasha, so we have no problem filling this hour. Um, I was wondering, are there any interesting use cases for the railways that are specific for that kind of companies?
Well, Deutsche Bahn, German Railway it's a huge company, a huge enterprise. So we
Yeah,
have, I read that in the news. I'm not really sure if that's the truth, but I think we have 800 subsidiaries and acquired companies all over the world. So there are thousands of use cases, but in general, we have two major, let's say, branches. One is internally bots for employees and colleagues and things like that to support, for instance, HR processes. And on the other hand, we have bots which face the customer, the let's say the travelers or the clients which are using our services. So these are the two major branches, and Yes, internally, I think it's easy to answer. We can do a lot in terms of process automation,
Hmm.
supporting our engineers in the fields, checking trains, for instance. There we have some projects where we use assistants to support them and to make everything a little easier and more efficient. And if you talk about bots which are facing the customers, then it's a little bit more complicated because it's always an issue with the customer expectation and the things we can do, which are really useful. And literally, we have two approaches. One is a more general one. So that means we try to expose our services, our offerings in a way that users, that customers, that travelers can easier access them. And on the other hand, we have specific use cases for certain scenarios where we try to support the travelers. So one is a little bit broader and the other one is a little bit more narrowed down.
Right, right. And of course, there a lot can go on one working day or day in the weekend with the railways. Is the bot made, or is the bot able to like to offer support when something happens with the normal railway program? How do you call it? The timetables.
Yes.
Is the bot that dynamic or not yet to be able?
It depends, but the bot we are currently working on, or we have several ones, but they all they the minimum they can do is to make it easier to access FAQs, to give you phone numbers if there's an incident, to give you some steps how you can get through this inconvenience. So that's the minimum. So this is the basic approach of having an easier way to get to the FAQs, which you honestly also could find in some apps on the website. But thanks to a bot, you only have one interface which merges all those sources into one UI. So this is the minimum. And on the other hand, we have some bots or skills which really can support you with real data, with live data, which can get the can schedule, some interruptions, can give you hints how to deal with that. So both is possible, the classic way, but we also have transactional, that's the term for that, transactional bots, which
Mhm.
have access to our APIs and get the real data in live in real time.
Cool, cool. And I was wondering, what was one of the first thing you decided to focus on when you started at Deutsche Bahn?
Okay,
Of
yes,
course, you've.
that's
Sorry if I.
easy. Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it?
but that's easy. Well, when I joined Deutsche Bahn, I was involved in a bunch of teams. So I had to deal with all aspects of conversations and voice, not just chatbots.
Hmm.
So we for instance, we did a Babel fish. Maybe you know that from the famous book. But this is a universal translator for train drivers. For instance, if a train driver has to travel from Germany through Belgium to the Netherlands, the train driver needs to speak German, Dutch, maybe French, so
Yeah.
several languages. And to support them, we had a universal translator which also support the control center and the train driver at the same time. So both can stick to their native language, to their mother tongue, and talk to each other. And this also reflects not just the translation, it's not just the translation technology, it also uses NLU, natural language understanding. Because if the train drivers travel through those countries, there are some kinds of predefined messages. And to improve the translation, we also try to get those predefined messages using NLU. And this gives simply a better result in the end. And this is one part. So we have to deal with model translation, natural language understanding, so everything you can imagine in this universe around conversational AI. And on the other hand, I supported several teams building chatbots. And there was, I personally think, the biggest lack was conversation design, not that much technology. It was more the issue with conversation design. And I spent most of my time to build up an editorial team, people which are able to deal with conversation design. That was my major task.
Yeah. It's we are a breed on our own, right? You cannot just pull somebody from who does web content and then say, okay, now you do bots. It takes a lot more, of course, as most of the viewers will agree on. So we called this broadcast "How to Design Convincing Conversational Experiences," and what would be three maybe rules of thumb people can go by to reach this goal, to create convincing journeys?
Yes. Well, there are more than three rules, more than
just mention as much as you want.
Yes.
I'll leave it up to you.
Because we already discussed that. I think the number one issue is a combination of the scope. So what exactly do you like to achieve with your bot? And this intersects with the why question. So why should anybody in the world prefer your bot over something else? So if you, for instance, most people start with FAQs, but what's the benefit? So why is it easier to get to an FAQ, to a frequently asked question, via your chat bot, your conversational interface, than simply improving the search on the website? If you can't answer that, then there's no reason to build it from my point of view. Or let's say it in the other way, spend more time in a convincing elastic search. And if you like to, simply add an user interface which looks like a chatbot, but it doesn't has to be one. So I think that's the starting point. And usually, what I saw in practice, usually people they start with a vision too big, so they try to build a virtual assistant which can deal with almost everything. But this usually fails because the users they don't know what to expect from your bot. And if you have a very broad approach which deals with a lot of topics, people don't know how deep they can get into that and which topics you really cover, so they're usually lost after a few questions. And this is one issue. And on the other hand, you could narrow it down, but then it's a little bit more like commanding. And then you need to be careful that it's still a conversational experience, because otherwise you could build something easier, maybe an assistant on a website, a mobile app with a few buttons. So you have to deal somewhere in between, and which what does help me to narrow it down, to find a good scope, to define that, is simply to get into the user's role and then think about what they are doing and where they want to have somebody else fulfilling this task. And this is a little bit this idea of having an assistant. So if there's something people don't like to do, which they like to maybe forward to somebody else doing that for them, then this might be a good idea. And then you need a scenario which is capable of voice, or let's say which supports the idea of having a chatbot if you prefer something to write. So you need a scenario, a certain scenario which is in a way that it's really a scenario where people like to chat and not to use, for instance, a website or a mobile app. To give you an example, um, people complain about the idea of, or the task of booking a train, for instance. They need a connection from place A to place B, from station A to station B. And if you think about that, it seems to be a perfect fit for a conversational experience. And indeed it is, if you have a simple connection from one major station to another major station. Then it works perfectly. It works like a charm using your voice or using a bot technology. But once you have some maybe some stops in between, you like to travel together with your family, some have some kind of discounts cards, one wants to leave earlier, you want to sit together, then it gets complicated. And then a chatbot might fail. And now people complain about that. But this is fair, because if you think about a human to human conversation, the human to human conversation would also fail. You can't get all those information. You can't keep them in your brain, and then you get lost if it's getting too complicated. And once you have a scenario which is that complicated, and you observe people talking to each other, you will see that they, for instance, turn around their monitor to their display to show you what they are currently filling out in the form, or they use
This is
pen
too
and
much.
paper. Yes, and once you have that, then it's not the best use case for voice. You have to narrow it down to something which fits into a few turns, which you can keep in your mind. For instance, there's the Miller number. Miller number is something which describes how many information you can store in your brain during a conversation. And the rule of thumb is something like 7 plus minus 2. So if there are more aspects than 7 plus minus 2, then usually an, in quotes, open conversation, a natural conversation might fail. Yes, in this case, you might think about kind of a process, a very guided conversation, but this feels somehow unnatural. And if you try to build this kind of processes where you guide the user through the booking process, for instance, then the chance is high that the user might get stuck in some kind of state that he can't correct his answers. So then it's getting complicated in another way. So to sum up, you need a scenario feasible for voice, which, for instance, follows the Miller number, which is feasible for voice or for chatbot technology. And you need to answer the why question. And to get to this point, observe real humans talking about this topic to each other. So this is the starting point. And then you get to conversation design. And I have a simple guideline how to do proper conversation design. This is, first of all, try to avoid states. So keep it as natural as possible. And with natural, I don't mean human. People are not dumb. They realize that this is not really a social conversation like you do it with humans. There are some restrictions. They have to follow some certain rules to get to a success. So it's about a natural experience, a natural conversation. And if you follow that, if you avoid states, then it's about optimizing the content. And optimizing the content to me means that at first you have to take the content, the answers you have, and you have to optimize them. Maybe you can use the keep it simple stupid paradigm to make your content more conversational, shorter, more to the point for the conversation. You have to reduce the amount of content you usually have on your website to a minimum. And then, unfortunately, you have to extend it again with some guidelines, some guidance. With guidance, I mean, for instance, if somebody asks for um, uh, maybe a membership card, and this might be, in terms of the intent detection, in terms of the language, be quite close to credit card. Just to give you an example, then it's a good idea to add to the answer for, let's say, a credit card, a sentence like, and if you like to know more about our membership card, you can ask me something about the membership card. You have to give the user a hint how he can rephrase his question to get to the right answer. And this is, by the way more efficient than to have this kind of switch in between, where you at first hand ask, do you want something to know about credit cards or membership cards? This is always an additional step. But if you give the most probable answer, then you will hopefully answer most users' intent. And if you give a hint how to rephrase, then the minority of people not having a sufficient answer, they can rephrase and then get to the right answer. So that means first shorten your content, then add this kind of hints, guidance, and then you need to give the user a hint if the conversation is still open. I've seen a lot of bots which simply give you an answer, but there's no, in quotes, action item at the end of the answer. So the user does not know what he should do now. Is the conversation over? Or can he ask something new? Can he refine his request? So you need to give the user a signal on how to continue. And if it's over, you should tell the user the conversation is over. And then last thing, if it's a multimodal experience, you could add some kinds of ships or quick replies, maybe some galleries to make the experience simply more engaging, more convincing. So this is my simple guideline, which I try to teach editors. And so far, this is, I think, quite successful.
Cool. Yeah, that's our great tips, great advice. And I know that in theory it would be best to design voice first, because then it's easier to take what you built towards chat.
Yes.
But do companies do that really in practice, or?
Yeah. Yes, the voice first approach. I think it's because of that. Because if you talk, you force yourself to be more to the point, to keep it shorter. And honestly, it's easier to turn a spoken conversation into a written one than vice versa. So that's simply the reason. Unfortunately, in practice, I see that rarely. Honestly, it's a little bit more about, it's not that much about voice first, it's a little bit more about experience. What I observed in practice is you rarely have the chance to really create a spoken conversation before you turn it into a working chatbot for several reasons. Yes, one reason is that a lot of the content needs to be approved and maybe is already written in other scenarios. So you get predefined approved content, and all you can do is to optimize it. It's hard to get time, money, and 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 an agreement to go the voice first way. So what we do is the other way around. We teach editors, once they optimize the content, what to look for, how to shorten it, how to optimize it. That's a little bit like voice first, but it's the other way around. They first optimize the content, and then we take examples which might not work that good, and then we talk to each other, we talk about the content, we read it aloud and explain why and how to optimize that. Yes, and we often use those samples in kind of a playbook where we write the, let's say, bad example and how you can do it better, because we made the experience that a collection of examples is more insightful for our editors than having kind of a guideline, which is very formal, which feels like a book. They rarely have the time to really read a guideline of 20, 30 pages, but giving them kind of a PowerPoint presentation with all those samples and sample phrases, and this is more helpful in our experience.
Right. It's awesome tips. Yeah, we had a question from Paul de Lange from the Netherlands. Yeah, this broadcast is not about platforms, so I was also curious. What software do you use for conversational at the Deutsche Bahn? Is it Cognigy, or there are probably more than one vendors?
Yes, unfortunately, I can't get that much into detail here.
Okay.
But yes, Deutsche Bahn is using a bunch of technology providers. We have also a team working on a dedicated platform for the internal use at Deutsche Bahn, which is built on IBM Watson Assistant, for instance. Yes, I do still a lot of work with Cognigy, um, and it depends. Yes, surely, if we build something, for instance, for the Google Assistant, then we have to use Dialogflow, the technologies provided by Google. If it's for Alexa, we have at least partly to use what Amazon offers with the Alexa Skills Kit. So it depends, and this is an ongoing process. There's on a regular basis, we evaluate the current situation on the market, which tools might be more helpful, where is some progress, should we change our technology decision? Yes. So there's not a simple answer to that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, you mentioned earlier that it's important to start small, but not too small. But once you start, what's the best practice for deciding what to build next? Of course, you watch what people ask and what answers they get and what turns into a fallback. But yeah, what's your best practice on that?
That's exactly what you say. We do analytics, so we see what people ask, what they don't ask, what we thought they might ask, what details are missing, where we need to optimize our content. Do we need um, a new topic? Yes, it's not just having new simple answers. Sometimes we observe there's a need for a completely new topic. For instance, it's not just about travel and booking of trains. It's also about finding a parking lot, a garage, to find some bicycle parking places, rental bicycles. And then we observe how often is that asked, and is it worth it to spend time in this topic to make the bot more broader in terms of the content, because that's always also a risk. If you have a single skill bot and you add question and answers all the time, then at some point your natural language understanding will explode, and it will mix up all those things, and then it's hard to maintain it. So what we do is that we also discuss where do we have to separate a big skill into simpler ones. That's a little bit like Google Actions or Alexa skills. That's the idea. So a lot of our bots, they are single skill bots, but we also have bots where you have to select a certain topic to improve the quality of the bot. This is a little a downside for the user, because he has to know which topic is of interest. He has to somehow get into this topic, which is equal to a skill. But once he gets there, the quality is way better than compared to having everything in one huge skill. And this is something we discuss over and over again. And because other than Amazon and Google, because we have full control over all skills where we can switch between, we can improve the switch from one skill to another, also using NLU. So it's a little bit more flexible compared to what Amazon and Google can do.
Okay. Yeah. So if the user selects a certain topic, then the bot goes to look for the answer within that domain, right? So
Yes, we simply switch between the NLU. Yes,
yeah,
the natural language understanding. We have several models for certain topics which are equal to skills, and we switch between them. Yes.
right. And just a quick question, but are you also looking into knowledge graphs
Yes.
instead of the intent-based, more classic
Yes.
way? Yeah.
Well, I'm not involved in projects using knowledge graphs currently, but this is also something which is built by other teams. But the bots I'm working on, they're all intent based and uh, very, very much built in an editorial way. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. And these different bots you mentioned, they appear to be the same for the user, right? It's not a different avatar with a different personality. It's the user doesn't notice that it's a different bot, or do you say, "Hey,
Uh,
I'm the
yes.
bot about lost luggage. My name is
Yeah.
James." Oh,
Um, well, we have some kind of, it's called skill sharing, so we can share certain topics between bots. So the technology is there. We provided that. We built that. We also share some kind of life cycle behavior between bots, but there's not yet this kind of one Deutsche Bahn bot. Yes, maybe this will be there in a few years. I don't know. Something which is in an ongoing process and an ongoing discussion. But currently, we have several bots. As said, Deutsche Bahn is a huge enterprise with a lot of subsidiaries, and we build bots for several of those.
right. I saw another question coming in. Yeah, it might be off topic for you, but I don't know. How would you design conversations for kids, and what type of research would you do for this?
Yes, indeed. That's not my topic, so I can't give you that much of guidance here, not that much of tips. Well, um, well, I can tell you kind of an anecdote, but this is not really related to conversation, but it's for me it was quite enlightening because I once did build a web game, a mobile or web game,
Mhm.
which was on for Disney on Heck a Hare. I think you know this book. Guess How Much I Love You is, I think, the name of the book. And the game was called Heck a Hare. So you had to find the hare somehow in an image and click on this hare. And we thought about everything, and we did so much research how to build it, how to address kids, and so on and so forth. And then I gave it to my son, which was exactly the target audience.
Mhm.
And my son, he discovered the pattern of how those hairs appear in the image in minutes. He did trick the game in minutes, and this was he was 3, I think 3, and we had to change because of that the whole game logic. So whatever research you are doing, because it's hard to do research with kids depending on the age, really try it out with friends and family and observe them while using your idea. That's cheaper and more insightful than spending money for huge research. That's my opinion in this special case.
Right.
Mm. Well, but there's another thing which I would love to do, but
Mhm.
unfortunately nobody is willing to pay me for that, which
No.
is also related a little bit to the kids idea. I think one of the innate and major issues of conversational AI is that our bots, they have the capability of a 2 or 3 year old, but they speak or answer in a perfect manner. So the answers, they seem to be from a very sophisticated grown up, but on the understanding side, it's on the level of a 2 or 3 year old. And and I think the overall bot experience would be way better if we could answer in the same manner like we understand, because this would be a perfect hint to the user that he has to change his language in a way that a 2 or 3 year old can understand that. And to give you one more example, if you talk to somebody who is just about to learn your language, who is not really fluent in your language, then you change your language. You make it easier so he can better understand you.
Yeah.
And this is the idea, but I haven't found any company which is willing to do that for
Oh, maybe
reasons.
somebody's watching and will contact you. But
Yes, but I think it would be weird if the Deutsche Bahn bot would answer like a 2 or 3 year old to improve the experience. Not sure if that would really
yeah,
succeed.
but if you shouldn't use long sentences in your bot. But if you do, you pretend that the user can answer in long sentences as well.
Yeah,
So you can, of course, manipulate it.
yeah.
Manipulate it.
Yes,
Yeah, go on.
I see a question: how many people are involved in your conversational I team?
Yeah.
Well, because I am one of those people in our company jumping from one team to the other, working across teams and in more or less virtual teams. Even for that, I can't give you a sufficient answer, because overall we have dozens, maybe hundreds of people involved in the idea of conversational AI and voice. But those people work across several teams. So those teams focusing on a single bot, on a single technology, they're usually not that huge. Yes, we have a digital transformation, we have a restructuring, which which has this is one of the targets which has the aim to have teams which are usually not bigger than 10, 12 people overall.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, a lot of different disciplines are
Yes,
needed. So you have
yes.
guys
So,
arranging the APIs and content people. Yeah, content people,
yeah,
conversational people. Yeah,
yes.
great. And what policy? Maybe it's a bit heavy word, but what policy do you have regarding the live agents that are there as a backup? Is the
Mhm.
chatbot always live, also when there are no agents at the
Yes,
contact center?
yeah, yes.
And,
The bot is always live, and we can activate, deactivate we call it live agents. And we have several settings which help us to improve the handover from the digital assistant, from the digital agent to the live agent. So, for instance, if users ask in a certain way, then they get forwarded to the live agents during the business hours. And if there's no live agent available, then the users get an appropriate hint how to continue the conversation, or maybe how to write an email, something like that. And as said, this is based on the idea of having a scenario where we detect the need to hand over to a live agent. So if the user, for instance, asks for human help, that might be a clear hint. But on the other hand, we have some settings where we can change the confidence levels. And if we get under a certain confidence level, we also offer human support in this case. And this is something we refine in each. We are organized in sprints. So that means we have usually time spans of 2 weeks, and every 2 weeks we refine those settings, those properties. We discussed that, how to improve it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of companies, when they start out, they choose to first have their bot live in the same hours as the agents. But when you have more confidence in your bot and the bot can handle more, you can let it go.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yes, and that's the reason we want to make life for the human agents, for the live agents, easier. So the live agents, for instance, they also have access to the bot, to the same content. So it's first of all, we want to answer those repeating questions which come over and over again, or if there is a major incident, we want to give this information as fast as possible to the travelers. We want to support them as good as we can. And Barend, you seem to be frozen. No, it's okay. And this works 24 hours, 7 days a week, and during business hours, which we can change. Yes, if there's a major incident, we can change business hours so that there are humans also available outside those hours. Um, and and once the bot cannot help the traveler anymore, then it's getting forwarded to the humans, which then have more time, and the travelers, they don't have to wait that long. Don't have to stay in the waiting line. So all those things we discuss, we show how it improves, where we can improve it, what do we have to do, which settings do we have to change to make it more convincing, more engaging, more successful.
Yeah, great. We got a new question from Azamat. Because you told about the different platforms you guys work with. So, question is, how do you consolidate these different frameworks? How do you make sure that conversations are consistent between different platforms or frameworks? Also regarding NLU, NLP, and is it worth it to use a different framework for each channel?
That's not an easy question. First of all, the content stays the same across all those channels, as long as there's not a need to change it in a certain way for a channel. But usually content is not the issue. And the natural language understanding, the part how to understand the user, the request, the intent itself. Yes, this might rely a little bit on the framework, but in my personal experience, training, designing, how you separate intents, how you orchestrate your bot, all those more technical aspects are more important than the NLU itself. Honestly, if you have a good conversation design, then you can deal with an average NLU. But on the other hand, if you have the world's best natural language understanding, but your conversation design fails, it doesn't help you. So the NLU is not that important. But currently, for a single bot, we don't switch between the NLU if we are not forced to. For instance, if you work for Amazon Alexa, you have to use their NLU. You have no choice. Yes, maybe you can propagate some requests and combine it with some AI services, but at the front door, you need to use Amazon's NLU here. But in all other cases, you have the freedom to choose, and the decision we do is for one bot. But we evaluate that on a regular basis. And to give you another example, for model translation, for instance, where it's about translating from English to German or from French to Dutch, um, we have some tools which switch between the model translation. So that means for some languages, it might be more efficient to use IBM's translation services. For other languages, it might be better to use the Microsoft ones or DeepL or whatever. So it depends.
Yeah, thanks. Um, let's see. I'm looking at my list of questions. Uh, yeah, of course, you read a lot about how important context is for a conversational experience. Maybe you can share a little bit to the viewers, what they
Yeah.
can and should do with that, or what the first steps can be if you don't
Yeah.
apply it yet.
Yes. Yes. Context. I think there are two aspects to discuss talking about context. One is to store information, which is quite handy if your bot is capable of remember certain data without the need to ask over and over again for things the user already said. Yes, and in best case, if that's allowed for your bot, you can store some of those data in something we call a user profile, which makes everything easier. So if you know where somebody usually has his starting point, for instance, for a journey, then it might be better not to ask in each session for the starting point. Just it might be better to suggest this as a starting point, to give an example. So this is about storing the data, remembering the data. And what we do a lot in bots is we at least remember the former intents to make the overall experience a little bit more fluent. So if the user, for instance, asks for some for let's say for Wi-Fi, if there's internet at a certain station, railway
Hmm.
station, and the bot says, "Oh, great, we have internet in Berlin main station," and then the user might ask, "Oh, and what's about Düsseldorf?" Then the user does not has to formalize his intent again. It's remembered. So if the user says, "What's about Düsseldorf?" then he gets immediately the answer. In Düsseldorf, there's also internet.
Yeah,
So this is kind of a minimum context where we remember some things. Unfortunately, we are not allowed to store those informations permanently. There are a lot of regulations here, so it makes it a little hard. But on the other hand, which I think it's more important than having kind of a memory where you store context. It's to give the user some kind of orientation. This is more important. So what I mean is the context of the overall conversation and the context of the current answer is quite important. And there I use a concept which is called landmarking. So if the user asks something, for instance, what's the price for I don't know, for a beer, for instance. If the user asks what's the price for a beer, I never would answer with €3.50. Never. Because maybe the NLU failed and the user did
yeah,
ask for a price for something totally different. So that's why I use landmarking. I place a hint in the answer what I think you did ask. So the answer would be the price for a beer is €3.50.
yeah,
I repeat the intent in some way. And what I also do if it's a more complicated conversation, I give the user a hint how many additional answers I need where I am in the conversation right now. Luckily, most conversations you can I like the term project because you have usually the idea of a tree in mind if you talk about a conversation. And if you project a tree on a surface, all those small notes, all those answers are then in one frame. They are simply on the table, so it doesn't matter when the user asks something. The user can always ask everything which is somewhere hidden in your tree. This avoids states. But if you have some kind of states, if you need to collect data, something like that, if you can't avoid that, I think it's also important to note that, to give the user an appropriate feedback, to tell something like, "Oh, that was second question, and there are only two more, something like that. So the user knows where he is and how long it takes until he gets an answer. Yes, this is a little bit similar to landmarking.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, of course, we all want to have our bots as flexible as possible, so people can ask anything at any point. But then also the challenge comes with the NLU, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you find a balance in that? Because you don't want to push people into a funnel or a strict direction unless it's really something transactional they have to finish. But yeah, maybe you can elaborate on that a bit.
You mean how I can avoid states?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a simple example to I can give you to avoid states. For instance, if somebody asks something like I let's stick with the beers example. Yes, I know you are Dutch. You're from Amsterdam, so I think that might be of interest for you.
Yes.
No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
We also used it the last time, beer. Yeah. Always a good example.
Okay, and the user might ask something like, I want a beer. And then your bot only has Pilsner and Lager. So those are the two things the bot can offer. So usually people have this tree in mind. So if the user asks, I want a beer, then the bot will reply with something like, oh, do you mean you want a lager? You can answer with yes or no, something like that. And this is stateful. This is simply stateful. And you can avoid this state if you answer, if the user asks something like, I want a beer, if you then reply to the user with something like, we have lager and pilsner, and what of those do you like to get now? If you ask something like that back, and this without state, no state, this is simply the answer, because this is kind of digital nudging. You nudge the user into a certain direction how to reply to this answer. If you want to make it a little bit more concrete, you could also give a reply like, well, we have Pilsner and Lager. If you like a lager, please say something like, I want a lager. Well, this is a little bit too long. You need to shorten it. But this explains a little bit more, because this forces the user to write his intent, his question, in a fully qualified manner. And this then forces the user to write something like, indeed, I like a lager, or I like a pilsner. And because this sentence now is fully qualified, it works without having a state. You simply need an intent for beer, you need one intent for lager and one for pilsner. But the answer you give to beer, if the user asks for beer, the answer seems to be stateful, seems to force the user to reply to this certain question the bot might question back. But it's simply a stateless answer. And if the user ignores this answer, he can continue using your bot. He's not stuck in a state. And this is simply the idea. Always try to rephrase your answers in a way that the user gets guided through the conversation, that he knows what to do. And if you do something like that, you can avoid most stateful conversations.
Right. And that the user also, for example, is able to say, oh, no, let me see the menu for dinner first. That
Yes.
they can switch right away from beverages to food,
Yeah.
for example. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. I'm looking at the clock. It's already half past 9. But
yes, but as long as you think about the next question, I like to give you a free training. It's in the Cognigy Academy. It's academy.cognigy.com. And if you go there to all courses, then you find a conversation design course which covers the idea of states, how you can avoid them, which covers the idea of landmarking. And there you can watch this course in German and English, what you prefer.
Cool. Yeah, I probably did that one already, but we will share it in the comments. Yeah, that's nice. It's good way to absorb some knowledge, indeed. Yeah, maybe you can quickly talk about human bots and how avatars are becoming more human-like. I see it coming from all directions, also on television here in the Netherlands. Yeah, I'm a little afraid, aren't we diving directly into this uncanny value that these almost human-like bots are too real, and we expect human capabilities of having a conversation.
I totally agree. I don't get this. I don't know why companies try to build something which looks like a human, but isn't, and which then scares people more than engages them. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's what you mentioned earlier today. It looks like a human of 36-year-old or something, but it answers like a toddler of 3-year-old, or it understands at least.
Yeah, I personally think there are too many people involved in our business which have a completely wrong understanding of artificial intelligence, and which are guessing what they want, what they need based on what they read in the press and the media. And this is something which really harms our business. Yes, and well, that's another anecdote. I often do a talk which is called Bad Bots, and I'm just giving a list of things which don't work with bots and why they don't work. And it happened to me more than once that people afterwards uh, came along and then said to me, I totally agree to everything I heard in your talk. Can you support us building a bot? And then they say something which I said in the talk which does not work. So they don't listen. It's totally weird.
Or it doesn't land yet in.
Yeah.
It doesn't translate into other conversational design behaviors, let's say.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, and there's also a lot of misunderstanding. Sorry, but I've so many anecdotes. Another one I can tell you, which is a little bit related to that, which really did disillusionate me a little bit in terms of our business. We did build a bot which was, I personally think, which was really good in terms of all the restrictions we had. And we did some analytics, and we had a success rate from over 80%. So that means 80% of the users' intents requests they have been understood in the right way with an appropriate answer. And I was really proud and talked to the client, and the client, the client said he's not happy because he can see a few conversations which fail. And then I explained, well, 80% is awesome. It's really great. Even in academic circumstances, they rarely reach 80%. And this person then said to me, well, if I talk to a human, I have 100% success. And I was like, no. Did you ever try to talk to a human agent? And did it really succeed in 100%? But you see how hard it is to discuss conversational experiences.
Yeah, also with the human, there will be follow-up questions or confirmations or misunderstandings and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. Great. Yeah, I think then it's time to wrap up for today. I wanna thank you for your time, of course, and your sharing your knowledge. It's always a pleasure to listen to all your anecdotes as well.
Thank you for having me, Barend.
Yeah, my pleasure. And yeah, Peter Polmans asks if the recording will be available later. Yes, it will. So that's no problem. And people watching in playback right now can also post questions underneath the videos. We will make sure to answer them. Yeah, just want to mention next week on Wednesday, we have the second Entrepreneurs online networking event. It's quite cool, almost in real life networking, not on Metaverse, but it's pretty fun. And you will, yeah, if you want to join, you can find the info on entrepreneurs.live. And the next live interview will be in the new year in February with Open Dialogue, also very nice platform to learn more about. Yeah, so that's it for now. Thanks again, Sasha. Thanks to all the people who are watching and posting their questions. And yeah, see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.